Story 1. The Stone in the Road and the Choices We Make. On the outskirts of a quiet little town, there was a narrow country road, winding gently through fields of golden grass. One morning, after a stormy night, the townspeople woke to find a large stone lying right in the middle of that road. No one knew where it came from. Maybe it rolled down from the hill. Maybe the storm loosened the earth. Whatever the reason. The stone was now there, big, heavy, inconvenient. People passed by it every day. The first was a farmer hauling produce to the market. His wagon bumped hard as one wheel struck the stone. He cursed under his breath, glared at the obstacle, and continued on. "Someone should move that thing," he muttered. Later came a young woman on her way to work. She carefully stepped around the stone, nearly twisting her ankle in the process. "Why doesn't the town fix things like this?" she complained before hurrying off. One by one, people walked past. They pointed at the stone, criticized it, talked about how it made their morning harder, yet not one person actually touched it until one afternoon. A boy no more than 12 was pushing an old rusty bicycle along the road. The bike had a broken chain. He pushed it everywhere he went. When he reached the stone, he stopped. He looked at it for a long moment, then at the road behind him, then ahead. Nobody else was around. He set down his bike, placed both hands on the rough surface, and pushed. The stone didn't budge. He tried again, this time bracing his feet. The stone shifted slightly. Sweat gathered on his forehead, but he didn't quit, inch by inch. He rolled it off to the side of the road until it finally dropped into the ditch with a dull thud. Catching his breath, the boy noticed something shiny where the stone had been, a small pouch. Inside was a note and a few folded bills. The note read, "This road belongs to everyone. I placed the stone here to see who would care enough to move it. Reward goes to the one who acts, not the one who complains." The boy held the note to his chest, and as the wind brushed the tall grass beside him, he realized a simple truth. Life puts many stones in our path, but each one reveals the kind of person we choose to be, the one who walks past, or the one who stops. Story 2. The Old Carpenter and His Final House. There was an old carpenter named Lou, known throughout the region for his skillful hands and honest heart. For more than 40 years, he had built homes for countless families. Every porch beam, every wooden plank, every nail he hammered carried the careful devotion of a man who worked with his whole soul. As he entered the twilight of his life, Lou decided it was time to retire. He wanted to spend his remaining years tending his garden, sipping tea, and watching the sun dip behind the green mountains. But before he could leave the workshop, his employer, also his longtime friend, asked him to build just one last house. Lou hesitated. He was tired. His hands were no longer as steady. And truthfully, he wanted his career to end quietly, yet out of loyalty. He agreed. Then, this became the one house he built with a careless heart. Lou chose wood that wasn't very good, rushed through the measurements, and left joints imperfect that should have been flawless. He thought, "It's the last one anyway. No one will ever know." When the house was finally finished, the owner walked up, placed a key into Lou's trembling hand, and said, "Lou, this is our gift to you. This house is your new home." Lou froze. Every sound around him seemed to fade away. He looked at the walls he had rushed, the warped beams, the loosely driven nails. The house he would live in for the rest of his life was the worst one he had ever built. He stood there as if waking from a long sleep. Then he sighed softly. "If only I had known." The owner smiled gently, eyes warm with understanding. In life, we're not always building houses. Sometimes we're building our own future. What we do today becomes the place we live in tomorrow. Lou bowed his head. He understood. The lesson came late, But it was sharper than any lecture. Every action, even the last one, deserves to be done with all your heart. Because sometimes, we are the very ones who must live inside the results we create. Story 3. When the farmer opened the secret box in a quiet rural valley, where mornings smelled of soil and fresh hay, lived an old farmer named Elias. He wasn't wealthy, but he was kind, hardworking, and content with the simple life he tended every day. One autumn afternoon, while clearing an old storage shed behind his barn, Elias found a wooden box covered in dust and cobwebs. Its surface was carved with delicate symbols he didn't recognize, curves like flowing water, shapes like tiny flames. It was beautiful and strange. He didn't remember ever owning it. Curiosity tugged at him, but so did caution. On the lid was a small brass plate engraved with only 4 words, "Open when you're ready." Elias chuckled softly, ready for what he whispered. For days, the box sat on his kitchen table every time he passed it. His eyes lingered a little longer. At night, the glow of the oil lamp cast long shadows across its carvings, making it seem almost alive. Finally, one misty morning, after finishing his chores, Elias sat down in front of the box. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted the lid. Inside wasn't gold, nor jewels, nor anything one might expect from a mysterious box. It was filled with letters, dozens of them, written in his own handwriting. He unfolded the first one. It was dated 30 years earlier. He read the words slowly. "If you're reading this, it means you've forgotten how far you've come." Letter after letter followed. Messages he had written to himself in his youth, dreams he once had, fears he overcame, promises he'd made, victories he'd quietly celebrated, memories he had buried under years of work and responsibility. There was a letter from the year his crops failed, reminding him he didn't give up. A letter from the year his wife passed, reminding him he survived heartbreak with dignity. A letter from the year he nearly sold the farm, reminding him why he chose to stay. At the very bottom was the newest one, written in a firmer, younger hand. "One day, you will feel tired and think your life has been small. Open this box then. And remember, a meaningful life is built quietly, one honest day at a time." Elias pressed the final letter to his chest. His eyes glistened. For the first time in many years, he felt a deep, steady warmth, not from the fire in his stove, but from the simple truth he had once known: we all carry treasures within us. Sometimes, we just need to open the box to see them again. Story 4. A father's lesson for his hot-tempered son. In a small town tucked between rolling hills lived a boy named Mason. He was smart, energetic, and full of potential, but he had one flaw that often got the best of him. Mason had a fierce temper. A single harsh word, a minor mistake, even a teasing joke from a friend could make him flare up like dry wood catching fire. His father, a quiet carpenter named Samuel, watched him with growing concern. He knew that anger, left untamed, could carve wounds deeper than any blade. One summer afternoon, after Mason returned home from school furious once again, this time, after yelling at a friend, Samuel decided it was time for a lesson. He handed Mason a small sack of nails and led him to an old wooden fence behind their house. "Every time you lose your temper," Samuel said gently, "I want you to hammer one of these nails into the fence." Mason raised an eyebrow, confused, but agreed. The first day, he hammered in 37 nails. The next day, 22. The day after, 14. His arm grew sore. His anger slowly became harder to justify. And with time, Mason began to understand the effort it took to drive a nail, the same effort it took to lose control. Weeks passed. One morning, Mason ran to his father, chest heaving with excitement. "Dad, I didn't lose my temper once today. Not even once." Samuel smiled. "Good. Now every day you manage to stay calm. Pull one nail out." Mason did. Slowly the fence began to empty, until one day. He ran out of nails to remove. "Dad, look, they're all gone," he said proudly. Samuel walked him to the fence and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Yes. Mason, the nails are gone, but look at the holes." Mason leaned in, seeing the splintered marks, the scars across the wood. His father said softly, "When you're angry and say things in the heat of the moment, you leave marks just like these. You can remove the words. You can apologize, but the scars stay. Choose your words with care, because once they're spoken, you can never take them back whole." Mason stood silent. For the first time, he truly felt the weight of his anger. That day, beside the old fence, a boy didn't just learn to control his temper, he learned the power of gentleness. Story 5. The 2 water buckets and a lesson in positive thinking. In a quiet countryside farm, an old well stood near the barn, drawing cool, fresh water from deep underground. Every morning, a farmer named Jacob carried 2 wooden buckets to the well. One hung on his left, the other on his right. As he walked the long path back to his house, the bucket on his right was strong and sturdy. It held water perfectly, never spilling a drop. But the bucket on his left had a small crack along its side. As Jacob walked, water slowly dripped out, leaving a faint trail on the dusty road. By the time they reached the house, the cracked bucket was only half full. One day, feeling ashamed, the cracked bucket spoke up in that way only things in old stories can. "Jacob," it said softly, "I'm so sorry. Because of my flaw, I'm wasting your effort. The other bucket delivers a full load of water every time, while I bring you only half. I'm not useful anymore." Jacob set the buckets down and smiled gently. "Come with me," he said. He led the cracked bucket along the familiar path they traveled every morning. "Look around," Jacob whispered. On the right side of the road, dry soil, brown grass, nothing unusual. But on the left side, the side where the cracked bucket had always dripped the ground, was vibrant, covered in a ribbon of colorful wildflowers swaying in the breeze. "Do you see these?" Jacob asked. "I planted the seeds myself, and every day, you watered them without even knowing." The bucket was silent. Jacob continued, "You think your crack is a flaw, but it created beauty all along this path. Those flowers go into my wife's vases, brighten our home, and bring joy to everyone who visits. None of that would exist without you." The cracked bucket trembled, feeling something new: pride instead of shame. Jacob placed a gentle hand on its wooden rim. In life, we all have cracks, but if we choose to focus on what we can give instead of what we lack, our flaws can become gifts. From that day on, the cracked bucket no longer felt embarrassed. It walked the same path, carried the same water, but now it knew it was creating beauty with every step. And sometimes, that simple shift in perspective is all we truly need. Story 6. The story of the seed that refused to sprout. In a peaceful valley surrounded by soft hills, an old gardener named Rowan kept a small greenhouse filled with plants of every kind. People from nearby towns often visited, amazed at how everything he touched seemed to bloom with life. One spring morning, Rowan received a packet of rare seeds from a friend. Among them was one tiny seed unlike the others, darker, harder, almost stubborn-looking. Rowan planted all the seeds into rich soil, watered them carefully, and waited. Within days, green shoots began pushing through the earth. Except for one. The tiny, dark seed remained unchanged, silent. unmoving. Rowan watered it, checked the soil, gave it sunlight, whispered encouragement the way old gardeners sometimes do. But still, nothing. Weeks passed. The other plants grew taller, their leaves stretching toward the warm sky. Meanwhile, the small seed sat buried in the ground, refusing to sprout. One evening, Rowan knelt beside the stubborn seed and spoke aloud, as if it could hear him, "Little one, why are you so afraid to grow?" To his surprise, in the quiet of the greenhouse, a soft voice answered the voice of the seed itself. "Because," it said, trembling, "I've seen what happens outside. Storms, winds, heat, cold. Out there, everything is uncertain. Down here, I'm safe. I don't want to break open. I don't want to risk being hurt." Rowan listened gently, nodding. Then he said, "You're right. The world can be harsh. But staying hidden doesn't protect you. It only keeps you small." The seed was silent. Rowan continued. "Every plant here, every tree you admire, they all took the same risk. They broke open, allowed themselves to be vulnerable, and because of that, they grew into something greater than they ever imagined." The seed whispered. "But what if I fail?" Rowan smiled. "Then you learn and try again. But if you never open, you'll never know what you were meant to become." That night, something shifted inside the tiny seed. Fear didn't disappear, but courage grew quietly beside it. And the next morning, as Rowan entered the greenhouse, he saw it, a small crack in the soil, a fragile green shoot, trembling but reaching upward. The seed had chosen to grow, and Rowan whispered, "That's all any of us can do, grow, even when we're off for story 7. The last train of this day and the silent seed giver. It was late evening in the city, the kind of hour when streetlights glow softly and people move a little slower, tired from the weight of the day. The last train rumbled into the station, doors sliding open with a sigh. Inside, a young man named Carter slumped into an empty seat. He had worked a double shift, and exhaustion pulled at his eyes. All he wanted was to sit quietly until the train reached his stop. Across from him stood an older woman with silver hair tied neatly behind her head. She carried 2 grocery bags and swayed slightly as the train lurched forward. Carter noticed her, but his body felt glued to the seat. "I'm too tired," he thought. "Someone else will offer." But no one did. The train rattled on, passengers absorbed in their phones, headphones, or the long day behind them. Then, just when Carter closed his eyes, he noticed a man sitting farther down the row. A man in worn clothes, perhaps homeless, holding an old backpack tightly to his chest. His beard was untrimmed, his shoes scuffed. People kept their distance from him more out of habit than unkindness. The older woman's gaze drifted toward an empty railing, but her hands trembled slightly from holding the heavy bags, quietly, without any sign of hesitation. The homeless man stood up. He lifted his backpack, stepped toward her, and said softly, "Ma'am, please, take my seat." His voice carried warmth, not pity, not obligation, but genuine respect. The woman blinked in surprise. "Oh, I can't take your seat," she said. "You must be tired." The man smiled gently. "I'm used to standing. Please." She finally accepted, her shoulders relaxing as she sat down. No applause, no nods of approval. The train continued bouncing along the tracks as if nothing had happened. But Carter felt something stir inside him, a quiet shame, followed by something better understanding. He had strength. He had comfort. He had a warm home waiting for him. And yet the man with the least to give gave the most. When Carter stood up for his stop, he walked over to the man and whispered, "Thank you for reminding me how to see people." The man simply nodded as Carter stepped off the train. He carried with him a lesson he would never forget. Kindness is not measured by what we have, but by what we choose to share, especially when no one is watching. Story 8. When the lion forgot who he was. Deep in the heart of an African savanna lived a young lion named Cairo. Unlike the other lions, he was unusually quiet. He didn't roar loudly. He didn't chase gazelles. He didn't carry himself with the confidence expected of a lion. But because Cairo didn't grow up among lions. As a cub, he had been separated from his pride during a storm and was found by a family of sheep. They sheltered him, fed him, and raised him gently. The sheep loved him, but they also feared the world outside their meadow, and they passed that fear to him. "Stay with us," they would say. "The world is dangerous. Lions are dangerous." Cairo believed them. He grew tall, strong, and golden, but he walked with his head low, moving cautiously like a sheep trying not to draw attention. When he looked at his reflection in the water, he didn't see strength, he saw confusion. He whispered to himself, "Maybe I'm not meant to be anything more. One day." An old lion, scarred, majestic, and fierce, spotted Cairo grazing near the sheep. He approached slowly. "What are you doing?" the old lion asked. Cairo stepped back nervously. "Please don't hurt me. I'm just a sheep." The old lion stared at him for a long moment, then let out a deep, thunderous laugh. "You are no sheep. Look at you." He dragged Cairo to a nearby lake and forced him to meet his own reflection. The young lion trembled. "That can't be me," Cairo whispered. "It is," the old lion said. "You were born to lead, to hunt, to roar, but you've lived so long in fear. You forgot your own nature." Cairo felt something stir in his chest, a quiet rumble he had never noticed before. "Try it," the old lion encouraged. "Roar." Cairo inhaled deeply. At first, only a soft growl came out. He tried again, and then again. Finally, a powerful, earth-shaking roar erupted from his chest, rolling across the savanna like thunder. The sheep heard it and trembled. The other animals looked up. Even Cairo froze in awe. The old lion smiled. There it is, not the roar, the truth. Cairo felt taller, stronger, awake. That day, he didn't become someone new. He simply remembered who he had been all along. Sometimes, the hardest battle in life is not becoming stronger. It's remembering your own strength. Story 9. The teacher and the blackboard full of mistakes. Mr. Carter wasn't the kind of teacher who raised his voice. He didn't slam books. He didn't lecture endlessly about discipline. But everyone in Lincoln Middle School knew one thing: if Mr. Carter was planning a lesson, something unexpected was going to happen. One Monday morning, his 8th grade class walked in to find something strange. The blackboard, normally spotless, was covered in math problems, written crookedly and chaotically across the surface. And almost every single one was wrong. Some numbers were reversed, some calculations were completely off, some equations didn't even make sense. The students stared. A few laughed under their breath. One whispered, "Did Mr. Carter finally lose it?" When the bell rang, Mr. Carter walked to the front of the room with his usual calm smile. He turned to the board and tapped it with a piece of chalk. "All right," he said. "What do you see?" Hands shot up immediately. Mistakes, wrong answers. Everything is incorrect. The class burst into giggles. "Mr. Carter nodded thoughtfully, as if expecting exactly that. Then he asked a quiet question. "And what about the one problem I solved correctly?" The room went silent. On the bottom corner of the board, almost hidden under all the chaos, was a perfectly solved equation. One neat, correct answer. The students hadn't even noticed it. Mr. Carter put the chalk down and turned to his class. "Interesting," Isn't it? He said softly. 22 problems on the board. 1 correct, 21 wrong, and every single one of you focused only on the mistakes. The giggling faded. Some kids sat up straighter. You know, he continued, life works the same way. You can do many things right, show kindness, work hard, succeed quietly, and people may never mention those things. But the moment you slip, the moment you make one mistake, suddenly, that's all anyone sees. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. But here's the lesson I want you to remember. Don't let the world's attention on your flaws make you forget your strengths. What you do right matters sometimes more than you think. A hush filled the classroom for the rest of the week. Something shifted. Students encouraged each other more. They apologized faster. They judged slower. And long after those kids grew up, became nurses, mechanics, parents, business owners, many of them would still remember that messy blackboard, not because of the mistakes, but because one quiet teacher taught them that their value was bigger than their errors. And sometimes, all it takes is one correct answer to remind you who you really are. Story 10. The Blind Man and the Lantern of Kindness. A short story that reminds us why kindness is never wasted. It was a cold autumn evening when the last bus finally dropped passengers at the edge of a quiet suburban street. People hurried off, jackets zipped tight, breath visible in the crisp air. Only one man moved slowly. Mr. Ellery, a blind man in his late 60s, white cane tapping gently along the pavement. But that night, something puzzled the other passengers. Hanging from Mr. Ellery's hand was a small glowing lantern, old-fashioned, warm, softly flickering like a piece of the sunset caught in glass. A teenager whispered, "Why would a blind man need a lantern?" Another shrugged. "Maybe he just likes the look of it." A few people snickered quietly, but loud enough to be heard. Mr. Ellery just smiled, as if he understood far more than he let on. He walked slowly down the sidewalk, cane tapping, lantern glowing. The path ahead was narrow and dark streetlights had gone out days ago, and no one from the city had come to fix them. A young man named Josh, rushing behind him, finally asked the question everyone else was thinking. "Sir, if you can't see, why carry a lantern, Mr.?" Ellery stopped for a moment. The night felt still enough to hear the leaves falling. Then he lifted the lantern slightly. "This light," he said gently, "isn't for me." Josh blinked. Mr. Ellery continued, "I've walked this road for 30 years. Darkness doesn't scare me, but others who pass by, they can see, and if my lantern helps them avoid a misstep or see the ground more clearly, then why wouldn't I carry it?" Josh felt something tighten in his chest. The old man smiled again, this time with warmth that even the lantern's glow couldn't match. "Kindness," he said softly, "isn't about what we need. It's about what others might." As Mr. Ellery walked away, Josh noticed something he had never paid attention to before. People following behind were walking more safely. The light eased their steps. The street didn't feel so cold anymore, and somewhere inside him, Josh realized sometimes the people who seem to have the least to give are the ones who give the most. Because kindness isn't measured in eyesight, money, strength, or ability. It's measured in willingness. And on that quiet suburban street, one blind man with a lantern taught everyone a simple truth. When you choose to bring light into the world, you never walk in darkness, even if you cannot see. Story 11. The Cracked Pot and the Most Beautiful Work of a Lifetime. A story about how our flaws can become our greatest gifts. Every morning, just after sunrise, old Mrs. Langley walked down the narrow dirt path behind her house, carrying 2 clay water pots balanced across her shoulders. One pot was perfectly shaped smooth, polished, flawless. The other had a long crack running down its side, It leaked a thin trail of water with every step she took. And every morning, as they reached home, the cracked pot felt a deep sting of shame. "I'm sorry," it whispered one day, in that quiet, imaginary world where objects have feelings. "I lose half of what you pour into me. I'm damaged, useless. Why don't you replace me with a better pot, Mrs.?" Langley stopped. The breeze rustled the tall grass, and she smiled the kind of smile only people who have lived long enough to understand life's hidden wisdom can give. "Come with me," she said. She carried both pots back down the path, but this time she walked slowly, letting the cracked pot pay attention. On the right side of the path, where the perfect pot had always been, there was nothing. Bare earth, dry soil. But on the left side, where the cracked pot had hung the ground, was covered with wildflowers. Bright yellows, deep purples, soft whites stretching like a ribbon of color all the way to the river. "I planted seeds there months ago," Mrs. Langley said softly. "And every day, you watered them without even knowing." The cracked pot trembled. Mrs. Langley touched it gently, like a grandmother comforting a child. "You call it a flaw," she whispered. "But because of that flaw, my home is filled with flowers. My table has fresh bouquets. My neighbors smile when they pass by." She paused, letting the moment sink in. "Sometimes," she said, "the most beautiful work we do in life comes from the cracks we're most ashamed of." The cracked pot didn't reply. It didn't need to. For the first time in its life, it didn't feel broken. It felt purposeful. Story 12. The story of the bamboo in the great storm. A quiet lesson about resilience, humility, and the strength found in bending. There's an old village in the Far East where bamboo forests grow thick and tall, so tall that when the wind blows, the sky itself seems to sway. One summer, a massive storm swept in without warning. Thunder cracked like splitting stone. Winds roared through the valley with the fury of a wild beast. In the center of the village stood a mighty oak tree, proud, ancient, unshakable. Beside it, a grove of slender bamboo swayed in the rising wind. As the storm intensified, the oak tree boomed with confidence. "I have stood here for centuries. No storm can break me." The bamboo said nothing. It only bowed gently, letting the wind pass through its thin leaves. Then the storm unleashed its full force. The oak fought back, standing stiff, refusing to bend. But with every gust, its trunk strained, groaned, cracked, and when the strongest wave of wind came, the oak snapped in half, its giant body crashing to the ground. The next morning, when the sun returned, the villagers came out to assess the damage. They were stunned to see the mighty oak lying broken across the earth, while every bamboo stalk stood tall again, quietly lifting its leaves back toward the sky. A young boy asked the village elder, "How did the bamboo survive when the strongest tree did not?" The old man placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Because strength," he said, "is not always about resistance. Sometimes it is the courage to bend." He pointed to the fallen oak. The oak believed that giving in, even for a moment, was weakness, but the bamboo understood the truth. Life's storms aren't won by defiance, but by adaptability. The boy looked at the bamboo swaying peacefully in the soft morning breeze, and he understood. In life, the storms will come. Some will warn you, some won't. But the ones who endure are often those who know when to stand firm and when to bow, breathe, and let the wind pass. Story 13. The Little Bird and the Painful Journey of Learning to Fly. A reminder that growth almost always hurts before it lifts us. High on a rocky cliff, inside a small nest woven from twigs and soft feathers, lived a tiny bird named Lark. Lark was the smallest among his siblings, quiet, timid, always watching the world from behind their wings, while the others hopped around eagerly, dreaming of the day they would soar into the sky. Lark dreaded it. Just the thought of leaping off the edge made his chest tighten. But one morning, the mother bird looked at her children and said, "It's time." One by one, the bigger siblings stepped forward, with shaky legs but determined hearts. They jumped, and after a few frantic flaps, each found their wings. Lark was the last one left. His mother nudged him gently. "You don't learn to fly by thinking about it," she said softly. "You learn by falling and trusting that you'll rise." But fear wrapped around Lark like a cold blanket. Still, with the whole sky waiting. He closed his eyes and jumped. Immediately, the wind punched his tiny body. His wings beat the air wildly. Nothing worked. He tumbled downward, faster and faster, the world spinning in a blur. His heart screamed, "I can't do this." And then he hit the ground. The pain was sharp, hot, humiliating. His little body trembled with defeat. From above, his mother called out, "Get up, Lark, try again." "I already failed," he whispered. "No," she said. "You only fail when you stop trying." So with shaky legs and burning wings, Lark climbed the rocks again, and again he jumped, and again he fell. But each fall hurt a little less, and each try strengthened muscles he never knew he had. Finally, on the 10th attempt, when exhaustion nearly won, something changed. He didn't fall straight down. His wings caught the air. The wind held him up. And for the first time in his life, Lark rose, higher, higher, until the world below looked small and distant. He wasn't just flying, he was free. And in that moment, he understood pain is not the opposite of progress. It is the price of it. Every fall had been a step toward the sky. Story 14. The child who asked about the value of a stone. A quiet reminder that our worth is never decided by those who fail to see it. In a small mountain village, a curious boy named Eli lived with his father, a humble craftsman known for carving beautiful stones into works of art. One afternoon, Eli held up a simple, smooth stone he found by the river and asked, "Dad, what do you think this stone is worth?" His father smiled gently, the way parents do when they see a lesson waiting to be taught. "I can tell you," he said, "but it's better if you discover it yourself. Take the stone into town tomorrow. Don't sell it, just show it to people and see what they offer." Eli nodded, unsure but excited for the adventure. The next morning, Eli went to the busy village market. A farmer glanced at the stone and said, It's round and smooth. I could use it as a paperweight. I'll give you $2. Eli thanked him and walked away. Next, Eli stepped into a jewelry store. The jeweler held up the stone, studied it under the light, and said, "There's potential here. I could polish it, maybe use it in a necklace. I'll give you $50. Eli's eyes widened. 50 for the same stone. Still, he kept walking. Finally, he found his way to a small house at the edge of town. Inside lived an old gem collector with eyes sharp as crystal. The man took the stone carefully, turned it, weighted it, looked closer. Then he whispered, almost reverently, "Do you know what this is? This is a rare river sapphire, unpolished, but extraordinary. I would pay $5,000 for it, today." Eli nearly dropped the stone. He rushed home, breathless, and told his father everything. The father listened quietly, then placed a hand on Eli's shoulder. "Do you see?" he said. "The same stone, 3 different prices. Your value never changed. Only the eyes looking at you did." He held his son's gaze. Eli, remember this for the rest of your life. If someone ever treats you like you're worth little, it doesn't mean you are. It only means that they are not the right person to see your value. Eli held the stone tightly. For the first time, he felt its weight and his own. Story 15. The Silversmith and the Secret of Purity. In a quiet town tucked between rolling hills lived a young man named Aaron. Restless and full of questions about life. He often wondered why challenges felt so harsh, why people had to go through pain, and why life sometimes burned instead of blessing. One day, seeking answers, he wandered into the workshop of an old silversmith named Rowan, a man known not just for his craft, but for the wisdom that seemed to polish every word he spoke. Inside, the air shimmered with heat from a small furnace. Rowan stood over a crucible where a dull piece of silver lay melting beneath the flames. Aaron watched, fascinated, as the metal slowly turned into a glowing pool of liquid. "Why do you heat it so much?" Aaron asked. Rowan didn't look away from the fire. "To make it pure," he said softly. "Silver doesn't become beautiful on its own. It has to endure the fire." Aaron stepped closer. He saw tiny dark specks rise to the surface and disappear as Rowan carefully skimmed them away. "What are those?" he asked. "Impurities." Rowan replied, "They only show up when the fire grows hot enough." Aaron thought about his own struggles, disappointments, failures, fears he tried to hide. So, the fire brings out what shouldn't be there. Rowan nodded. "Exactly, and only then can it be removed." The flames roared again, brighter this time. Aaron noticed the silversmith never took his eyes off the silver, not for a moment. "Why do you watch it so closely?" he asked. Rowan finally glanced at him, smiling gently. "Because if I leave it in the fire too long, it will burn. If I take it out too soon, it will never be pure. I keep my eyes on it, because I know exactly what it can become." Aaron fell silent, watching the old man tend the silver with patience and care. After a while, he whispered, "How do you know when it's ready?" Rowan lifted the crucible, letting the molten silver settle. His voice dropped to a tender whisper. "When I can see my reflection in it." Aaron felt something shift inside him, something warm, something freeing. In that moment, he understood life's hardships weren't punishments. They were refinement. The fires he feared were not meant to destroy him, but to shape him. And perhaps, just perhaps, someone was watching over him with the same unwavering care, waiting patiently for the moment when he, too, would reflect something truer, brighter, and purer than before. Story 16. The Broken Ladder and How People Rise Beyond It. In a small rural town, behind a weathered farmhouse in a field of golden weeds, stood an old wooden ladder leaning against a barn. It belonged to a man named Matthew, a quiet, hard-working father who used that ladder for nearly everything: fixing roofs, picking apples, painting the porch. It was old, but he trusted it like an old friend. One afternoon, Matthew's son, 12-year-old Noah, watched his father climb the ladder to repair a loose shingle halfway up. A sharp crack echoed through the yard. A rung snapped. Matthew slipped, arms flailing, and barely managed to grab onto the barn's edge before falling. Noah's heart nearly stopped. He rushed to help, trembling. When Matthew reached the ground safely, the boy pointed angrily at the ladder. "Why don't we just throw it away? It's broken. It's dangerous. We should never use it again." Matthew brushed the dust from his hands, his breathing steadying. "No," he said softly, "we're not throwing it away. Not yet." The next day, Noah found his father sitting in the workshop, repairing the broken rung with new wood, sanding it carefully, fitting it perfectly back into place. The boy frowned. Why fix it? Why not just buy a new one? Matthew held the ladder gently, as though it had feelings. "Because," he said, "everyone, at some point, Is like this ladder broken in one place or another, a mistake, a failure, a moment that almost takes you down. But being broken doesn't mean you're useless. It means you need time, patience, and the right kind of repair. He tapped the new rung. What matters isn't whether something breaks, but what we do after it breaks. Noah thought about that for a long moment. So people can be fixed too, he asked quietly. Matthew looked at him, really looked at him with a father's understanding. Not fixed, he said, strengthened. If we choose to heal, the part of us that once broke can become the strongest part of all. Weeks later, Noah watched his father climb the restored ladder, step by step, rung by rung, steady, confident. The ladder didn't fail. It held him even better than before. And Noah realized something he would carry for the rest of his life. What breaks you today doesn't have to define you tomorrow. If you're willing to rebuild, your weakness can become the very place your strength grows from. Story 17. The grain of sand that finally understood its purpose. In the heart of a vast, endless desert lived a tiny grain of sand so small that the wind barely noticed it. Day after day, it lay beneath the scorching sun, surrounded by millions of grains just like itself. And yet, somehow, it felt completely alone. What am I even here for, it wondered. I'm too small to matter. I'm lost in a place where nothing changes, sometimes. When the wind blew, it would lift the grain into the air and toss it across the dunes. Each time, the grain felt helpless, like a meaningless speck pushed around by forces it couldn't control. One evening, after a long day of drifting and tumbling, the grain of sand landed near an ancient rock. The rock had been there for centuries, steady, unbroken, silent. The grain sighed. I wish I had a purpose like you. I wish I mattered. The heavy old rock chuckled gently. You think I've always been like this? The sand was surprised. Of course. You're strong. You're solid. You don't get blown away. But I wasn't always a rock, the old stone said. A long time ago, I was a mountain taller than clouds. The wind carved me down. The storms broke me. Time ground me into pieces, and now here I sit. The grain of sand trembled. So, you were broken. Broken, the rock replied with a soft smile. No, transformed. Every shape I've taken had meaning, even the ones that didn't look like much. The night wind whispered across the desert, creating gentle ripples in the dunes. Look around you. The rock continued. Does the desert feel empty to you? The little grain looked. The moonlight shone across the dunes, turning them silver, waves of sand stretching farther than the eye could see. It's beautiful, the grain admitted. And you, said the rock, are part of that beauty. One grain alone seems small, but millions together create landscapes, roads, shelters, and stories. A single grain may not shape the world, but without each grain, the desert wouldn't exist. The grain of sand felt something shift inside it, something warm, something peaceful. For the first time, it understood. It didn't need to be big to matter. It didn't need to stand out to have purpose. Its worth wasn't in its size, but in its place in the grand design. As the wind lifted it again, the grain no longer felt lost. It let itself be carried, knowing that every landing, every journey, every small moment was part of something greater. And in that quiet desert night, a tiny grain of sand finally felt whole. Story 18. The blind painter and the final painting of his life. In a quiet seaside town lived a painter named Elias, once celebrated for capturing light in ways that made people swear they could feel the sun on their skin. His paintings hung in galleries, in homes, in places where people sought beauty to soften the hardness of life. But as the years passed, a slow darkness crept into his world. First shadows, then blurs, then nothing. By the winter of his 70th year, Elias had lost his sight completely. People whispered that his career was over, that an artist without eyes was like a violin without strings. But Elias only smiled gently and said nothing. One morning, he asked his granddaughter, Lily, to guide him to his studio, the one room in the house that still smelled of turpentine, salt air, and the faint memory of color. "Grandpa," Lily whispered, "why come here? You can't see anymore." Elias ran his hands across the old wooden table, feeling the familiar grooves. "My eyes have retired," he said softly, "but my heart hasn't." He picked up a brush, dipped it into a jar of paint he could no longer see, and touched the canvas. Stroke by uncertain stroke, he began. At first, Lily tried to stop him. "It won't look like your old paintings," she warned. "It doesn't have to," he replied. "This one isn't for the world." For days he worked, sometimes painting through the night, sometimes simply sitting and remembering the colors he once loved. Blue that smelled like ocean wind, gold that felt like morning warmth, red that beat like a pulse. He painted from memory, from feeling, from a place deeper than sight, somewhere the darkness couldn't reach. When he finished at last, his hands trembled. "Lily," he said, "describe it to me." She hesitated at first, not because it was bad, but because it was beautiful in a way she didn't expect. The painting was nothing like his old detailed landscapes. Instead, it was bold, raw, full of sweeping colors that collided and danced like emotions made visible a sunrise exploding through storm clouds, an ocean wave caught between fury and grace, a heartbreaking and healing in the same breath. "It looks," Lily's voice cracked, "it looks like your soul finally learned how to speak." Elias exhaled, a soft, grateful sound. "I spent my whole life painting what I saw," he murmured. "But this is the first time I've painted what I am." He died peacefully 2 weeks later, and in time. That final painting hung in a small museum, with visitors often standing quietly before it, not because it was perfect, but because it felt alive. People said the blind painter could no longer see the world, but those who looked closely understood the truth. He had simply learned to see it from the inside. Story 19. The Matchstick Boy and the Ticket That Changed Everything. On a frozen December evening, when the wind scraped along the alleyways of a small American town like a cold whisper of loneliness, a young boy named Eli stood on the corner of Maple Street. His fingers were stiff and red, clutching a small box of matchsticks he hadn't managed to sell all day. People rushed past him, heads down, coats pulled tight, hearts elsewhere. Eli didn't blame them. Winter had a way of making everyone protect their own warmth first. But Eli had a dream, a quiet one, a stubborn one. He believed deep in the place where children still dare to hope that life could change in one heartbeat, one miracle, one moment of kindness. He just didn't know when. As darkness settled, Eli leaned against the brick wall and struck a match to warm his hands. The flame shivered, tiny but brave, painting a soft glow across his cheeks. In that brief light, Eli imagined things he had never touched: a warm meal, a real bed, and a voice calling his name not out of duty, but out of love. The match burned down quickly. Reality returned just as cold as before. He sighed and lit another. This time, when the flame flickered, he pictured something different: a big train leaving a crowded station. People waving, laughing, going somewhere better. Somewhere where life didn't hurt so much. Somewhere he wished he could go. Just once. But the match died too. Just as Eli prepared to light a third, a voice behind him said gently, "Cold night to be out here alone, kid." Eli turned to see an older man in a thick coat, carrying a suitcase covered in faded travel stickers. His eyes were tired, but kind. Eli straightened up. "Would you like to buy a match, sir?" The man smiled at the tiny flame still smoking between Eli's fingers. "Seems like you need them more than I do." Before Eli could respond, the man reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "I bought a train ticket earlier today," he said, "but plans changed. I can't go anymore. Maybe it should go to someone who needs a new start." He held it out. Eli froze. His breath caught in his chest. "Sir, I can't pay for that." "Good thing I'm not selling it," the man replied softly. "Just consider it a trade. Your match warmed more than your hands tonight." Eli didn't understand fully, but he felt something warm, something real settle inside him. He took the envelope with trembling fingers. The man gave him a gentle nod, then walked away into the snowy night as quietly as he had appeared. Eli looked down, a one-way ticket, to a city far beyond anything he had ever imagined, a place where he had distant relatives he'd never met, a place where better beginnings weren't just dreams lit by burning matches. For the first time all winter, Eli felt warmth not from flame, but from possibility. He held the ticket tightly and whispered, "Thank you." The next morning, as the sun turned the snow into glittering sheets of gold, a small boy boarded a train, his box of matchsticks replaced by a single, fragile hope. And somewhere in the world, an older man smiled, knowing that sometimes the smallest light can ignite the biggest change. Eli watched the town fade behind him. He didn't look back. For the first time in his life, he didn't need to. Story 20. The story of two raindrops who chose different paths high above the world, where clouds drifted like quiet continents of silver. Two tiny raindrops were born side by side. They shimmered together at the edge of a soft gray cloud, looking down at the vast landscape waiting below. One was named Lynn, the other, Ray. They were nearly identical, two perfect beads of water, but inside, their hearts beat with different rhythms. As the wind nudged the cloud closer to the earth, Lynn vibrated with excitement. "Ray, do you see that river?" she said, her voice like a bright little chime. "I want to dive into it. I want to travel miles, see forests, past towns, maybe even reach the ocean one day." Ray hesitated. "That sounds big, too big. I'm thinking of landing somewhere quiet, maybe on the leaf of a garden plant. Somewhere easy, somewhere safe." The cloud trembled, preparing to release its rain. Lynn laughed softly. "Different dreams." "Huh," Ray replied. "Different dreams." Then the cloud let go. The two raindrops leaped into the sky, but the wind carried them in opposite directions. Lynn felt herself falling fast. The air rushed past her like applause. Her whole world sparkled. She struck the river with a tiny splash and immediately became part of something powerful and alive. The river pulled her forward. Lynn traveled past willow trees bending like dancers, past rocks that roared with white foam, past ducks gliding across wide blue stretches. She was a small droplet in a great, unstoppable journey, but she felt bigger than ever. She whispered to herself, "This is what it means to live." Meanwhile, Ray drifted gently, almost lazily, through the breeze. He landed on a wide green leaf in a quiet backyard garden, and it was exactly what he wanted. Sunlight warmed him, bees hummed nearby, the leaf rocked softly like a cradle. Ray watched children play tag, listened to their laughter, felt the calm peace of staying put. "This," he murmured, "is enough." Days passed. Lynn traveled farther than she ever imagined. She merged with currents, evaporated into mist, danced inside clouds, and fell again as rain. Every path was new. Every moment felt like movement, growth, adventure. Ray, on the other hand, slowly soaked into the soil beneath the leaf, joining the roots of a tomato plant. He became part of this garden's quiet life, helping a small seed grow red and ripe. Years later, because raindrops never really die, they just change, Lynn returned to the river as snowmelt, flowing strong and free toward the ocean. Ray returned to the surface again as dew on the same garden leaf, glowing under the sunrise. They never met again, but both fulfilled exactly what they were meant for. Lynn became part of thousands of miles of water, touching oceans, clouds, mountains, her journey endless. Ray became part of nourishment, giving life to small things that fed families, his purpose, peaceful, rooted. 2 raindrops, 2 choices, 2 paths, neither right nor wrong. Because meaning isn't found in where you land, but in why you choose the path you choose. And long after the storm faded, the world carried traces of both Lynn and Ray, one in the rush of great waters, the other in the quiet sweetness of a backyard tomato. Both needed, both beautiful, both enough. Story 21. The old man by the river and the bottle that drifted in every morning, just as the sun began brushing gold across the horizon. An old man named Walter Finch walked to the river's edge. His back was bent, his steps slow, but there was a peaceful steadiness in his movements, like someone who had made peace with both the past and the passing of time. Walter had been coming to that same riverbank for decades. He'd lost his wife there years ago when they used to sit together on a worn wooden bench, watching the water drift lazily past. After she died, he kept coming, not out of sadness, but out of devotion. The river felt like the last place where her laughter still echoed. On one quiet morning, as fog curled gently above the water, Walter noticed something bobbing along the current. At first, it looked like just another piece of river debris, but as it drifted closer, he saw it was a glass bottle, old, scratched, sealed tight with a cork. Inside was a piece of folded paper. Walter chuckled softly. "A message in a bottle," he murmured. "Been a long time since I've seen one of those." With shaky but careful hands, he lifted it from the water and sat on the bench. The glass felt cold, like it carried a memory of distant places. He pulled out the cork, reached in with 2 fingers, and gently tugged out the paper. It was wrinkled, stained around the edges, but the ink was still clear. It read, "To whoever finds this, I feel lost. I don't know who to talk to. I don't know if anyone cares. If you're reading this, tell me there's still hope." Walter stared at the words for a long moment. The handwriting was young, desperate. Someone had thrown their pain to the mercy of the river, hoping it might find an answer for them. Slowly, Walter reached into his coat and took out a small notepad he always carried. His wife, before she passed, used to tell him, "Write down the things your heart whispers. They'll matter to someone someday." Walter tore out a clean sheet, and he wrote, "Yes, there is hope, more than you think. You are not alone, not even now, not even in this moment. The world needs you, even if you cannot see how yet. If the river carried your message to me, then it means you're meant to stay, to try again, to take one more step. Someone you haven't met is waiting for the kindness only you can give." He folded the note, placed it back inside the bottle, and pressed the cork firmly in place. But he didn't keep the bottle. He let it go gently, placing it back into the drifting current. "Find your way back to them," he whispered, "whoever they are." The bottle floated once, twice, then began its slow journey downstream. the sunlight glinting off its glass like a quiet blessing. Walter sat back, letting the warmth of the morning settle over him. And for the first time in years, instead of feeling the weight of his loneliness, he felt connected to the river, to the stranger who cried out for hope, to the promise that kindness can travel farther than we ever will. Somewhere, miles away, the bottle would wash ashore again, and with it, a message from an old man on a quiet riverbank, a message reminding a lost soul that even in the vastness of the world, someone still cared. And sometimes, that is enough to keep a heart alive. Story 22. When the richest man in the village lost everything. In a quiet countryside village where seasons changed slowly and everyone knew everyone's grandparents there, lived a man named Gregory Hale. Known far and wide as the richest man in the village, he owned fertile lands, barns filled to the rafters, orchards stretching beyond the horizon. His house was the biggest, his horses the fastest, his tables always overflowing. And yet, whenever people spoke of Gregory, they did so with a strange mixture of respect and distance. Because Gregory was wealthy in everything except warmth, except kindness, except people. One autumn afternoon, a fire broke out in the field behind his mansion, carried by the dry wind. It roared through the grasslands like an angry beast. By the time villagers rushed to help, the flames were too strong. His barns collapsed, his orchards turned to ash. His house, once the pride of the village, fell in a rain of embers. In a single night, everything Gregory owned disappeared. The next morning, the villagers found him sitting on a fallen beam, covered in soot, staring at the ruins as if trying to understand a language he'd never learned. For the first time, he looked small, fragile, human. No one approached him. After all, Gregory had spent years keeping people at arm's length, too busy, too proud, too important to join a neighbor's dinner or lend a hand on a tough harvest day. But late in the afternoon, an elderly woman named Martha, whose tiny cottage Gregory had once mocked, walked up with a basket of warm bread. "You must be hungry," she said gently. Gregory blinked. "Why would ye help?" Martha smiled, a slow, knowing smile, shaped by years of hardship. "Because losing everything," she said, "is something no one should face alone." That night, someone else brought him a blanket, another brought stew, a group of younger villagers helped him clear debris. Children gathered bits of unburned wood for him to rebuild. For the first time in his life, Gregory felt something more valuable than wealth: belonging, community, grace. As the weeks passed, he worked side by side with the villagers, not as a wealthy man commanding labor, but as a neighbor rediscovering what truly mattered. He learned names he'd never bothered to memorize. He shared meals cooked by hands weathered from years of honest work. He listened to stories under the evening lantern glow, and slowly, he saw that the richest moments in life were never the ones bought with gold. Months later, when his new home finally stood modest, warm, built with shared effort, Gregory invited the entire village for supper. He raised a glass and said, "I once believed the worst thing in life was losing everything. But now I see the worst thing would have been never losing it at all. Because only then did I discover what being truly rich means." And in that simple home, filled with laughter and flickering lamplight, Gregory Hale became not the wealthiest man in the village, but the most grateful. Story 23. The Locksmith and the Lesson of Trust. In a small American town where people still greeted each other by name and front porches creaked under the weight of summer evenings, there lived a locksmith named Elias Turner. Elias wasn't wealthy, nor was he famous, But he was known for something far more valuable. Everyone trusted him for 30 years. Whenever someone lost a key, jammed a lock, or accidentally trapped themselves out of their own home, Elias showed up with his old leather toolbox, his gentle smile, and his calm, patient way of speaking. But the truth was, Elias carried a quiet fear. He often wondered, do people trust me because I'm good, or just because they have no choice? It was a question that tugged at his chest more than he ever admitted. One cold December evening, just as he was closing his shop, a young woman burst through the door. Her hair was windswept, her eyes wide with worry. "My mom's stuck in her room," she said breathlessly. "The door won't open. She's sick and can't get out. Please, can you help?" Elias grabbed his toolbox and followed her through the snow-dusted streets to a small, aging house. The woman's mother lay inside the locked room, coughing weakly. The door was old, the lock rusted, and every second felt like a ticking clock. Elias knelt and began to work, but the lock was stubborn, sticking, resisting, refusing to budge. The daughter paced frantically behind him. "Hurry, please, I can't lose her." Elias swallowed hard. For the first time in years, doubt crept into his hands. What if I fail? What if I'm not as capable as everyone believes? But then, the old woman's voice came through the door, soft, trembling, but steady. "It's all right. I trust you." Elias froze. She trusted him. Not because she had to, but because she chose to. He closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and let the noise of his insecurities drift away. His hands steadied, his mind cleared. And with one precise twist, the lock clicked. The door swung open, revealing the frail woman on the bed. Her daughter rushed in, tears streaming, hugging her tightly. Elias stepped back, relief washing over him. The old woman looked up at him, her eyes warm. "You know," she whispered, "locks aren't built to keep people out. Not really. They're built to protect what matters. And trust. Trust is the same way." Elias felt something shift deep inside like a door opening. Walking home through the quiet snowfall, he realized the truth. People didn't trust him because he was perfect. They trusted him because he always showed up, because he cared, because he tried, again and again, no matter the difficulty. And from that night on, the man who spent his life opening doors finally unlocked something within himself. A belief that trust isn't given because of skill, but because of heart. Story 24. The long way around that took a man farther. In a peaceful American town lined with maple trees and slow-turning seasons, there lived a young man named Caleb Morgan. He was known for one thing: he always wanted the fastest way, the quickest shortcut, the shortest route, the most direct path. Whether he was walking to work, fixing a task, or making a decision, Caleb believed that anything taking longer than necessary was a waste of precious time. One morning, on his way to a new job, Caleb saw two paths leading through the woods. The first was straight, wide, and well-trodden. The second curved sharply, disappearing behind tall pines, longer, quieter, and clearly avoided by most. Caleb, of course, stepped onto the straight path without a second thought. But halfway through, a fallen tree blocked the trail, thick, immovable, impossible to climb. He tried pushing it, pulling it, kicking it, but nothing worked. Frustrated, he backtracked all the way to the crossroads and glared at the winding trail he had ignored. "Fine," he muttered, "but this better not make me late." He started down the curved path, expecting annoyance. Instead, he found something else. The woods opened into a clearing he had never seen before, sunlight spilling across tall grass, birds weaving music through the air, a small creek whispering gently beside the trail. The path rose and dipped. winding like a story that didn't want to end too soon. Along the way, Caleb met an elderly man resting on a log, sipping from a metal thermos. Beautiful morning, isn't it? The old man smiled. Caleb nodded, still irritated. I took this path because the other one was blocked. The old man chuckled. Funny thing about life, the straight road isn't always the one that gets you where you truly need to be. Caleb frowned. But isn't the shortest path the best one? Only if distance is all you care about, the old man said. But sometimes the long way teaches you something the short way never will. Caleb continued walking, the man's words echoing in his mind. When he finally reached the end of the trail, he found himself surprisingly right on time, and strangely lighter, calmer, more present over the next few weeks. Caleb began choosing the long way, more often roads with curves, tasks requiring patience, conversations that took time, slowly. Something inside him shifted. He started to understand. The long way allowed you to see more, to learn more, to grow more, to breathe. One evening, as he stood on the same winding trail, watching the sun melt behind the treetops, he whispered to himself, I didn't get here slower. I got here wiser. And from that day on, Caleb Morgan, once a man obsessed with shortcuts, became someone who knew that sometimes the road that looks like a delay is actually the road that carries you farther than you ever imagined. Story 25. The Old Boatman and the Lesson of Watching the Water. In a quiet lakeside town, where mornings smelled of mist and pine, lived an old boatman named Samuel Reed. Every day, no matter the weather, Samuel pushed his wooden rowboat onto the water and ferried people from one side of the lake to the other. His hair was silver, his hands calloused, and his eyes carried the calm of someone who had spent a lifetime listening to the whispers of the waves. One summer afternoon, a young businessman named Evan rushed toward Samuel's dock. His suit was neat, his watch expensive, but his face was tight with impatience. Take me across, Evan said. Quickly, I'm late for a meeting. Samuel nodded, steady and unbothered. Of course, hop in. As they pushed off the shore, Evan tapped his foot anxiously. Can't this boat go any faster, he asked. Samuel smiled. It goes exactly as fast as it needs to. Evan groaned and looked away. The lake stretched wide and quiet, too slow, too peaceful for someone who lived on deadlines. But as Samuel rowed, Evan noticed something strange. The old man wasn't watching his oars, or his passengers, or even the far shoreline. He was watching the water. Every ripple, every shift, every movement beneath the surface. Evan finally asked, Why do you stare at the water so much? Samuel's oars paused mid-stroke. Because the water tells me how to move, he said softly. It shows me when to pull harder, when to rest, when to change direction. If I fought it, I'd tire myself out, but if I listen to it, the lake carries me. Evan frowned. I don't have time to listen. I have a life to chase. Samuel dipped his oars again, creating soft, swirling circles in the lake. That, he said, is why you're tired. Evan stared at him, confused. Samuel continued, his voice steady as the water around them. You rush, you push, you fight every current in your life. You think the world will reward you for rowing harder, but sometimes the wisest thing you can do is look at the currents around you. The world gives signs. It tells you when to move and when to wait. He nodded toward the water under the boat. People who only chase the shore never see the lake. And people who never see the lake never understand the journey. By the time they reached the far dock, Evan's impatience had softened into something quieter, almost peaceful. He stepped off the boat but turned to the old man. What if I don't know how to read the water of my own life? Evan asked. Samuel smiled. eyes wrinkling with kindness. Start by slowing down. The water only speaks to those who stop long enough to listen. That night, Evan found himself walking by the lake slowly, for the first time in years, watching the ripples, the stillness, the reflections. And he realized the old boatman hadn't taught him how to row. He had taught him how to see. And sometimes, that is the lesson that carries a person farther than any boat ever could. Story 26. The clock that stopped but was still right. Twice a day in a small antique shop tucked between a bakery and a tailor, there hung an old clock, dusty, silent, its hands forever frozen at 4:17. Most customers never noticed it. Those who did would chuckle and say, "Why keep a broken thing on the wall?" But the shop's owner, an elderly man named Mr. Whitlow, refused to take it down. One rainy afternoon, a young college student named Liam wandered into the shop, shaking off droplets and looking for shelter. His eyes drifted to the clock. "It doesn't work," Liam said. Mr. Whitlow smiled. But it's not useless." Liam raised an eyebrow. "It's stuck. It doesn't tick. What good is a clock that can't keep time?" The old man motioned for him to come closer. "That clock," he said, "is right twice every single day." Liam blinked. "Yeah, but only by accident." "Exactly," Mr. Whitlow replied. "And there's the lesson." He walked to the counter and poured 2 cups of warm tea. "You see," he continued, "people are so quick to throw themselves away when they feel stuck, when life stops moving the way they planned. They say they're behind, or broken, or not good enough. But even a stopped clock still holds truth inside it. It still has value. It still aligns with the world twice a day." Liam sipped his tea, the warmth settling into him. "But what about the rest of the time?" he asked quietly. "What about when it's wrong?" Mr. Whitlow leaned back, eyes soft. "That's when it reminds us that being wrong doesn't erase our worth. Everyone has moments when they're not at their best. Everyone falls out of rhythm. Everyone stops sometimes." He tapped the glass, covering the still hands. "A broken moment doesn't mean a broken life." Liam stared at the clock, suddenly seeing himself in its unmoving face, the plans he had failed, the choices he regretted, the days he felt he wasn't enough. Mr. Whitlow continued, his voice gentle. "When you're stuck, don't call yourself worthless. Just know you're in a pause. And even in that pause, you can still be right about something. You can still matter to someone. You can still show truth at the exact moment someone needs it." Outside, the rain softened into a quiet drizzle. Liam set down his empty cup. "So you keep the clock as a reminder?" The old man nodded. "Yes, a reminder that everything has value, even when it's not moving." As Liam left the shop, he glanced back at the frozen hands pointing forever to 4:17, and for the first time in a long time, he felt a little less broken and a little more like someone who might still be right when the world needs him most. Story 27. The Beggar and the Diamond. He never knew he had in a bustling American city, where car horns and rushing footsteps filled every street corner, there lived a homeless man named Arthur Mills. Arthur slept beneath a worn bridge, collected cans for change, and wrapped himself in an old patchwork coat someone had thrown away years before. He was quiet, gentle, and almost invisible to the world around him. One cold winter morning, as commuters hurried past, Arthur sat against a brick wall holding a cardboard sign that read, "Anything helps." Most people didn't look at him. Some dropped coins without slowing down. A few offered pitying glances before disappearing into the crowd. But that afternoon, a traveling monk, calm, barefoot, and strangely serene, approached Arthur. He studied the old coat draped around Arthur's shoulders. "Where did you get that coat?" the monk asked softly. Arthur shrugged. "Found it in a donation bin. Been wearing it for years." The monk's eyes widened, but he only nodded and handed Arthur a loaf of bread before walking away. Arthur ate gratefully and thought nothing more of it. The next morning, the monk returned, this time with urgency in his step. "May I see your coat?" he asked. Arthur hesitated but nodded. The monk carefully examined a torn inner seam, then reached inside with delicate fingers. After a moment, he pulled out a tiny cloth pouch, so old and dusty Arthur hadn't even known it existed. Inside the pouch was a large, uncut diamond, glowing faintly in the sunlight. Arthur froze. This can't be real," he whispered. The monk placed the diamond gently in Arthur's trembling hands. "It is very real," the monk said, "and it has been with you the entire time." Arthur felt his heart pounding, disbelief flooding through him. "But I've slept under bridges while holding something worth a fortune. How could I not know?" The monk smiled a calm, knowing smile. "Because many people walk through life unaware of the treasure they already carry." Arthur looked up, confused. "Treasure? I've had nothing my whole life." The monk shook his head. "You've had gentleness, patience, a heart that never grew bitter despite hardship. These are diamonds too, Arthur. But like this stone, you didn't know you possessed them." Arthur stared at the diamond, a symbol of everything he never believed about himself. "Why didn't the person who owned this coat keep it?" he asked. "Perhaps," the monk replied. "They, too, never realized what they had." Arthur sat there in silence, the weight of the truth sinking in. Not just the diamond, but the message. He had spent years believing he was worthless, unseen, insignificant. Yet all that time, value lived within him, unrecognized, untouched, waiting. By nightfall, Arthur made a decision. He would sell the diamond carefully, wisely, and rebuild his life. But more importantly, he would finally see himself differently. For the first time in decades, he stood tall, because he understood something few people ever do. Sometimes the greatest fortune isn't what we find, but discovering the worth we carried all along. Story 28. The girl who asked how strong she needed to be. On a windy afternoon at the edge of a quiet coastal town, a young woman named Claire climbed the worn wooden steps leading to her mentor's porch. Her eyes were red from holding back tears, and her shoulders carried a weight too heavy for someone her age. Her mentor, an old professor named Rowan, was sitting in his usual rocking chair, watching the ocean breathe in long, steady waves. Claire stood in front of him, hands trembling. "Professor, how strong do I have to be to get through all of this?" Her voice cracked with the kind of exhaustion that comes from fighting too many silent battles. Rowan didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached beneath the chair and pulled out two objects: a thin glass cup, delicate and transparent, and a solid metal mug, scratched and dented from years of use. He set them both on the wooden railing. Then he took a small stone and dropped it into the glass cup. It shattered instantly. Claire flinched. Next, he dropped the same stone into the metal mug. The mug barely moved. Rowan turned to her. "Claire, strength isn't about being unbreakable." He placed the broken pieces of the glass into her hand. "Glass looks beautiful, but it shatters the moment life hits it." Then he tapped the metal mug gently. "Real strength is built, dent by dent, not from avoiding hardship, but from surviving it." Claire looked out toward the ocean, wild, restless, yet constant. "Then, how do I become like the mug?" she whispered. Rowan smiled, not with pride, but with understanding. "By letting life leave its marks on you. By letting pain teach you instead of harden you. By choosing to rise again, even when you're terrified you can't." He stood, and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't need to be strong all at once, Claire. You just need to be strong enough for today. And tomorrow, you try again." A single tear slipped down her cheek, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from relief. As the waves crashed softly in the distance, Claire finally realized strength wasn't the absence of breaking. It was the decision not to stay broken. Story 29. The seed that grew in the dark. Late one evening, in a quiet suburban backyard, a grandfather and his granddaughter sat side by side on the old wooden deck. The porch light hummed softly above them, casting a warm circle of light on the grass. The little girl, Emily, had been struggling at school, feeling small, unnoticed, and overwhelmed. She finally asked the question that had been weighing on her heart, "Grandpa, why does it feel like I'm trying so hard, but nothing is happening for me?" Her grandfather didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood up slowly and walked to the corner of the yard, where a small garden bed sat under the dim glow of the porch light. He waved her over. There, in the soil, was a tiny sprout, thin, fragile, barely noticeable. Grandpa knelt beside it. "Do you see this little seedling?" Emily nodded. "For weeks," he said softly. It grew in complete darkness, buried deep, cold, alone. No one cheering for it, no one even knowing it existed. He brushed the soil gently with his fingertips, but instead of giving up, it pushed and pushed and pushed. Not toward applause, not toward praise, just toward the light it believed was somewhere above. Emily looked at the sprout more closely. It was so small, yet somehow full of quiet determination. Her grandfather continued, "Sometimes life puts you in the dark, too, not because you're forgotten, but because you're growing roots." He turned to her, eyes soft and shining. "Growth doesn't always look like success. Sometimes it looks like struggle. Sometimes it feels like being buried." Emily swallowed, her chest tightening not from sadness, but from understanding. Grandpa smiled gently. "But remember, sweetheart, the seed doesn't break the ground in one giant leap. It rises one tiny inch at a time, and the moment it sees the smallest hint of light, it keeps going." He placed a warm hand over hers. "You're not failing. You're preparing. And when it's time for you to break through, you will, just like this little seed." The wind rustled the leaves around them, carrying the smell of earth and hope. And for the first time in weeks, Emily felt something she thought she had lost. She believed she would rise. Story 30. The lesson from the last leaf. There was a young woman named Mai who lived in a small mountain town. After a painful event shattered her life, Mai fell into a deep sadness. She lost almost all her strength to keep going. Every day, she sat silently by the window of her tiny rented room, staring down at the small garden behind the house where a single almond tree stood alone in the cold wind. Autumn passed, winter arrived. The leaves fell one by one, until only one last leaf remained on the branch. Mai watched that leaf every single day. She convinced herself, when that leaf falls, maybe that's when I'll have no reason left to keep trying. Her neighbor, Mr. Tom, an elderly painter, often brought her warm food or shared little stories to cheer her up. Mai would only smile weakly, then return to her window and stare at the lonely leaf. One night, a strong winter storm swept through the town. The next morning, Mai woke up, rushed to the window, and the leaf was still there, still clinging, still refusing to fall. Strangely, seeing that stubborn leaf stirred something inside her, first a spark of curiosity, then the tiniest flicker of hope. Day after day, the leaf held on through rain and wind, and each time she looked at it, Mai found herself whispering, If even a tiny leaf won't give up, why am I so ready to? Until one afternoon, she discovered something that made her heart tighten. That last leaf wasn't real at all. It was painted. Mr. Tam had quietly painted it on the wall the very first night the storm rolled in. When she confronted him, Mai could barely speak. Why? Why would you do that? She asked, her voice trembling. Mr. Tam smiled gently. Because sometimes, he said, a person only needs one small reason to stay. That leaf wasn't meant to fool you. It was meant to remind you that resilience doesn't always come from the world outside. It begins inside you. Mai didn't say a word. She didn't need to. She understood. The last leaf hadn't saved her. The belief it awakened in her had, and that spring, tiny green buds began to appear on the almond tree. Again, quiet proof that life returns, as long as we choose to hold on.